Hi, I'm Laura.
And I'm Joe.
And this is CrimeDivers.
Hello everybody, welcome to today's episode.
Hello.
So today, are you ready for another history lesson?
Yeah. I enjoyed the Halloween ones.
Yeah, I know, but obviously, when it comes to ghosts, you like to know the history behind it, don't you?
All the ghosty things are historical, so...
Yeah, and because of this time of year, we have a story for this time of year, right? Okay, so, in the UK, we celebrate, is that the word? We have a tradition.
Yeah.
On the 5th of November.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know, do other people know about it? I'm not sure if people overseas know our tradition.
They might do, but I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you're going to tell us.
Yeah, of course, I'm going to tell you, but I do know in the past, I have spoke to a couple of friends overseas, and when I have spoke about it and they didn't know what I was talking about, so... as I said, I'm going to talk about the events of the 5th of November. So since today is the 2nd of November, I think.
Remember, the
5th of November. And I'm going to tell you that later. That's a rhyme that I'm going to tell our listeners later.
Okay.
So the name of our episode is the Gunpowder Plot.
And we're obviously in the UK.
And we're obviously in the UK, and everybody in the UK is going to know what it is. But I think, myself included, most people probably don't actually know the history of
I know
this case.
I do know the story behind it, but I probably don't know the whole story behind it.
You will know the same as what I knew, and you will be surprised when you find out that it's
a lot more than that.
Yeah, and a bit different.
Oh, fair enough. Are you ready to dive in then?
Yeah, let's dive in. So, as I said, this episode is about the events of the 5th of November, and we're back in 1605.
Oh wow, that's a way back.
This is definitely the oldest one,
Yes.
apart from our ghosty ones.
Yes.
But yeah, this will be the oldest true crime case that we've ever done.
Yeah.
So in the UK, we call the 5th of November, well, I call the 5th of November Bonfire Night.
Mm-hmm.
There's other names for it. There's like Guy Fawkes Night, there's Fireworks Night, but to me it's Bonfire Night. What do you call it?
I call it Fireworks Night.
You call it Fireworks Night, so
Yeah.
there you go. Obviously I don't think that sounds right, it's just Bonfire Night.
I think because more recently, in recent years, bonfires don't happen as much as the fireworks.
Yeah,
It's more fireworks than bonfires.
Yeah, it's definitely more about the fireworks.
That's why I feel like it's more like a fireworks night than a bonfire night now.
Yeah, well, I've just always
I'm
called
sure you'll
it.
explain to the people what
Yeah, of course.
that is.
Yeah, there's no point in us talking about it when people don't know what we're talking about. So,
Yeah.
So every year in the UK, we have public displays of fireworks, and everyone gathers round a massive bonfire to watch them. But as Laura said, it's not. Now it's more sort of about the fireworks
yeah,
rather than
not
bonfire.
everywhere has a bonfire.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know anybody that has a bonfire these days.
Really, we still have one here, but it's been cancelled this year because of COVID.
Oh
again.
yeah, well, the fireworks display in where I'm from, in Trent, that's...
Yeah, but they're having the big fireworks display at Edinburgh at New Year.
Yeah, I know, it makes no sense.
So that makes no sense at all.
I know.
Anyway, yeah, so... Well, I've never been to a display without a bonfire being there, so...
Oh, well, I have.
But I haven't been for a few years. But anyway, yeah, that's what we do. We go... There might be a bonfire, there might not be.
I think more commonly in years there was, but maybe not so much now.
And fireworks. So the tradition, I'm saying is, now that Laura's just said that, I should probably say the tradition was to make a guy out of rags filled with paper or straw, and he would be put on top of the bonfire so everyone could watch him burn.
That just sounds really bad, doesn't it?
I know, I was actually just saying this to John yesterday after I'd written it, and I thought, it sounds really bad that if you're telling other people this, that people in the UK watch a fake man being burned on a bonfire.
I know, it
like,
doesn't
that's
sound...
not right.
No, I know. Maybe that's why they're not...
Maybe that's why they're maybe phasing it out a bit, I don't know, because I'm not actually sure if we still have the guy on top.
I don't know.
We did when I was young anyway, we did.
Yeah.
And because in the weeks running up to bonfire night, kids would make a guy and they would put him in a wheelbarrow or a like a pushchair, and they would knock on people's doors asking penny for the guy. And this was to help fund to buy the fireworks for the annual display. Did you not know that?
No, I didn't know that, no.
Yeah. So, and then on the night, it would be stuck on top of the bonfire and burnt.
Yeah.
I will get to it and I'll tell you all why, because the people who don't know about this are probably thinking, what the hell are the people in the UK doing?
Yeah.
I will get to it. But nowadays, I think it's really just something for the kids to look forward to. Like, after Halloween and before they run up to Christmas, it's...
Yeah, you get, like, they have, like, their sparklers that you get.
Yeah, they go to a local display with their parents, they'll watch the fireworks, maybe get a burger or some candy floss. Sometimes at the bigger displays, they'll maybe have, like, a couple of fairground rides. So... It is like, it's more for the kids now, I would say.
Yeah, I would say so.
And that's what I'm saying. I think a lot of people either don't know or they kind of just forgotten about why it actually happens.
Yeah.
And as I said, I'm not even sure that people in other countries are aware of it. So since it's a true crime case, it's the right time of year, I thought I'd do some research and tell everyone about it and how it came about. But I'll tell you now, it's a lot more than what I thought it was going to be. I literally thought... I think this is going to be a really short episode, like, maybe 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Could be a wee bit longer than that.
Not too much longer, though.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see how long it lasts.
Yeah.
Right. So, what I'm about to tell you was the greatest terrorist conspiracy Britain has ever known. And if it had been successful, so spoiler alert, it was unsuccessful. The Gunpowder Plot, obviously, because that's the name of the... it would have been the bloodiest and most appalling plot in English history. So this was an attempt to blow up the entire British establishment. So on Sunday the 20th of May, 1604, 5 men met in a pub called the Duck and Drake Inn, which is in London. They were there to plan the assassination of King James I and the destruction of his entire government. So, I'm sure people who know about this, people in the UK, I'm sure everybody probably thinks that this was Guy Fawkes' idea, the man that was called Guy Fawkes.
Yeah.
No.
Oh.
So this is why I'm like, why is it Guy Fawkes Night? Why?
Yeah, why do you call it that?
Because he was the one who was going to actually set off the explosion. Yeah.
Right, okay.
But it wasn't his idea. I assumed it was.
Oh, okay.
But they were actually called to the meeting by a man called Robert Catesby. And it was he was the,
mastermind behind it.
He was all his idea. So Robert Catesby was born on the 3rd of March, 1572. He was born in Warwickshire and educated in Oxford. His family were recusant Catholics. Had to look up recusant.
Yeah.
Why do I always feel like I'm saying, I had to look it up?
Because you're not brainy enough to know it.
Well, put it this way, it's about religion, and I do not know religion, so... Yeah, so I had to look up recusant, and according to Wikipedia, it says, quote, recusancy, from the Latin recusare, was the state of those who refused to attend Anglican services during the history of England, Wales and Scotland. So they were Catholics who were supposed to attend church, but because it was Protestant, they refused to
go to that church.
So they were called recusants. So basically, it's like based on the Latin refuse, I think it is.
Right, okay.
So the term was first used to refer to people known as recusants who remained loyal to the Pope and the Roman Catholic Church. So obviously...
Well, they're not going to go to a Protestant church.
Yeah, because they were remaining loyal. I mean, a lot of them did go to the Protestant services, but we'll sort of get...
Yeah, okay.
We'll get it. So in 1602, in Queen Elizabeth's England, Robert Catesby appeared to have everything going for him. He was a nobleman with a reputation as a good swordsman and a man of action. He had land and he had connections, but as the country was aggressively Protestant, being Catholic counted against him. 70 years earlier, the English Reformation took place, and that's when the Church of England broke away from the authority of the Pope and the Roman Catholic Church. So since then, most Catholics had learned to keep their heads down and keep their faith to themselves, and even attending church with their Protestant neighbours. But Robert Catesby, he was proud of being a Catholic, and he let people know that. So he was part of a network of wealthy Catholic families who refused to conform. So they chose to suffer crippling fines for not attending church, and they were named the recusants, which, I already told you that, comes from the Latin word refuse. I had read that somewhere. So Robert Catesby had a cousin who lived in Warwickshire. Her name was Anne Vaux. She lived in a private Catholic, her own kind of private Catholic world. Like, she didn't sort of shout about it like what he did. In her manner. So priests she would shelter priests in secret, and she would help kind of get children sent to be educated in Catholic schools abroad. In their own eyes, the recusants were of a league of minority, struggling to keep the true faith alive, but to the authorities, people like Robert and Anne seemed dangerous. So England was at war with Catholic Spain, and that meant that the recusants were potential fifth colonists. I had to look that up. Which is a group of people who undermine a larger group from within in favour of an enemy. So they were a security risk to be watched at all costs. So in 1602, Anne Vaux was secretly harbouring Father Henry Garnet. He was English, but he travelled to the continent and joined the Society of Jesuits, I think, whose headquarters were in Rome. He must have been living in Spain and came back to England, and as England was at war, this was a really bad thing to do because it seemed like a hostile and dangerous gesture towards the English government.
Right.
So Henry Garnet moved from house to house, celebrating the Mass in secret. As a Jesuit, he was part of a new order of priests sent to England to stir up Catholic revival to undermine Elizabeth's authority as head of the English Church. So the hope of a Catholic revival is what gave Robert Catesby and his cousin Anne the strength to live as recusants. So basically, that's what this story is about. It's about getting a Catholic revival, like the Catholics wanting to be able to
openly and freely,
and live freely, and keep to their own faith.
Not have to mix with Protestants.
Mm-hmm. So they knew that to harbour a man as dangerous to the Protestant state as Henry Garnet risked imprisonment or even death, but that was the price of their faith. That's how they were willing to die for their faith, basically.
Fair enough.
So the question was, when would the Catholic revival begin? Despite the best efforts of the Jesuits, most English Catholics were drifting into conformity because it was just, they were getting fined and, it was just easier to conform.
Yeah. The
Protestant church never seemed more secure. So for Robert Catesby to turn around Catholic fortunes, it was clear some radical change was needed. So in the autumn of 1602, a friend of Robert's called Thomas Percy rode to Edinburgh. I always managed to get Edinburgh in somewhere. To meet James VI of Scotland on a mission on behalf of the English Catholics. So the hope was that Catholicism would be tolerated, but unfortunately there was no hope of that while Elizabeth was alive. But they knew obviously she was going to have to die sometime.
Yeah.
And the next in line for the throne would be James VI of Scotland.
Yeah.
So, and he had made it known that when he was on the throne, Catholics would be allowed to live a free life.
Right.
So James was a Protestant, but he appeared tolerant of Catholics. He was the son of the Catholic martyr Mary Queen of Scots, and his own wife had converted to the faith. So as the future king, he seemed to answer to the recusants' prayers. So obviously they just had to wait for Elizabeth to pop her clogs. So when Thomas Percy met him, James, he didn't give any solid promises though, and he basically just encouraged Thomas to believe what he wanted to believe.
Right, okay.
So he kind of went away from that meeting believing that things were going to change for the better, and that James was going to have a tolerance for English recusants. So when the English Catholics Okay. So when the English Catholics heard this, they were like, yes, everything's going to be all right. We're going to be able to live freely. We just have to wait for Elizabeth to die.
Yeah.
So 6 months later, so didn't have to wait long, on the 24th of March 1603, Queen Elizabeth died, and James VI of Scotland became James I of England. To start with, King James was adored. He was doing everything he was expected to, and he relaxed the persecution of Catholics. The recusants didn't get fined anymore for not attending church, but that only lasted for about a year.
What was he just did that just to...
Obviously just to kind of get his loyal, what's the word? Like, the people being loyal.
Yeah.
His country being loyal to the king.
Yeah.
Basically. So, by the summer of 1604, it was clear that nothing was going to happen by way of formal... By the summer of 1604, it was clear that nothing was going to happen by way of a formal tolerance of Catholicism, and it was realised that James had no intention of changing anything. English Catholics felt betrayed, especially Thomas Percy. He saw that James was weak and had buckled under the weight of Protestant opinion. Under pressure from Parliament, James reimposed the recusants fines and ordered all Catholic priests out of the country. Those that stayed risked being hunted down, just like it had been before when Elizabeth was on the throne. So, just back to normal.
Yeah, sounds like it.
So Robert Catesby, just like everyone else, was fuming, and he made a decision. He was going to blast King James and his Protestant regime to pieces. So that brings us back to the 5 men who met in the Duck and Drake Inn on the 20th of May 1604. Mm-hmm. This was the meeting that was to set in motion the Gunpowder Plot. These men were said to be wild and rather silly young men. Their personalities were unstable and they were really poor, but they all had the same goal in mind, winning England back for Catholicism. These men were Robert Catesby, Thomas Winter, Thomas Percy, Jack Wright and Guy Fawkes. They all took an oath of secrecy on a prayer book before Robert told them all his plan. He wanted to blow up the Houses of Parliament with gunpowder. Now, this wouldn't have just killed King James. This would have killed the whole establishment of Stuart Protestant England.
Can you imagine? I mean, I've seen the Houses of Parliament. It's massive.
Well, you came out, like, back then, it was the king, the royal family, there was all the lords, bishops, judges, all the members of Parliament, like, were one blast. So this was huge. Mm-hmm. So Thomas Percy was still fuming for his visit with King James. Thomas Winter, he was Robert's cousin and had recently converted back to Catholicism. Jack Wright was Robert's oldest friend. And Guy Fawkes was recruited for his expertise with mining and explosives. Guy Fawkes was a Catholic from Yorkshire and he became basically a Catholic terrorist. He had been an experienced mercenary soldier in the southern Netherlands, which is the place that we now call Belgium, and he had been fighting for the Catholic forces there. It was a well-known area where English Catholic men might go for military experience and to get away from the recusancy laws. He had been there for over 10 years and had only just been back in England for less than a month, and Thomas Winter introduced him to Robert Catesby. Guy Fawkes was vital because at this early stage of planning, Robert had no practical idea on how to take out Parliament. Guy Fawkes knew about siege warfare and he knew about digging mines. He knew how to lay gunpowder for maximum effect. Mm-hmm. So Robert Catesby believed that he was doing God's work.
Right.
And if that involved killing lots of innocent people, well, you know, so God works in mysterious ways. Okay. And it was ultimately for the good, so it was alright then.
Yeah,
that's basically what he thought. So they concluded their meeting with a private mass, the priest apparently unaware of the plan that he was blessing. And so the plotting began. The current session of Parliament only had a few weeks to run. It would then be adjourned until February 1605, so that, you know, so they had a time scale to work with. So to start off, they needed someone on the inside. So out of all the plotters, Thomas Percy had the best connections, and he was given a job as a parliamentary guard. So he was given lodgings right in the heart of Westminster, and they got Guy Fawkes to move in. And Guy Fawkes was the one picked to light the gunpowder because no one knew him in London, so it would be easy for him to sort of move about and get everyone organised without people recognising him or knowing who he was. So Robert Catesby recruited 2 more men. Thomas Bates was Robert's servant, and Robert Keyes was a recusant gentleman from Lincolnshire, a trusted and honest man, apparently. I put apparently at the end of that because I was like, how can you be honest, like trusted and honest, but you're going to blow up Parliament?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So these 2 were to help Guy Fawkes. And I put in brackets, I can't just call him Guy or Fawkes. Like, he's just Guy Fawkes, isn't he? Like,
we know him as Guy Fawkes.
Yeah, he's just Guy Fawkes.
Yeah, that's fine.
In the UK, Guy Fawkes is such a
well-known name.
Yeah, just like a household name, Guy Fawkes. So.
Yeah. You have to use the whole name.
You have to use the whole name, yeah. So these 2 were to help him stockpile the gunpowder necessary for the blow, which was purchased at the docks. They stockpiled 36 barrels, which was £10,000 in weight of gunpowder. So the explosion would be the equivalent of 250 cannons all firing at once. So that's a lot.
That is a lot.
So that was all sorted, but they still needed to find the right spot for the explosion to be set off, like obviously under the House of Parliament, and they still had to find an access to it. Within 2 months to go, they still hadn't figured it out, but lucky for them, in December 1604, the state opening was delayed, so instead of February 1605, it was put back to winter 1605, basically because in the summer months, disease was rife.
Right.
So they didn't want like all these people in the same place.
Yeah,
So by the winter months, the plague would have like died down. So it was that's why it was in the winter.
Fair enough.
So with the postponement of Parliament, Robert Catesby decided that as he had more time, this changed the scale of the plot. Up until now, he had planned only the explosion, but now with time on his hands, he returned to the Midlands and began to plan the plot's second stage. Did you know there was a second stage?
No, I didn't know there was a second stage.
A full-blown Catholic uprising. For this, he needed the support of local recusants. So in March, he recruited John Grant, Jack Wright's brother Kit, and Robert Winter, who was Thomas Winter's brother. So what Robert Catesby wanted was a cavalry uprising centred in the Midlands. He told rich nobleman Ambrose Rookwood and Sir Everard Digby. The idea was, in advance of the explosion, a hunting party would be raised, and once the king was dead, this hunting party would ride to Warwickshire and kidnap James's eldest daughter, Princess Elizabeth. So basically, she would be queen, because she was next in line, so she would be the queen, and they would be able to rule through her as a Catholic country.
Oh, right,
so that was the aim.
Right, okay.
So while Robert was in the Midlands, news came through from London. Thomas Percy had paid his landlord an extra £4 and secured a lease on a cellar. It used to be the old palace kitchens. Now it was empty and hired out for storage. And guess where that cellar was?
Underneath the House of Parliament.
Right, it ran directly underneath the Parliament House. Wow. So that was handy. So during the summer months of 1605, Guy Fawkes and associates smuggled the gunpowder into the cellar, and once that was done, it would sit there until Parliament reconvened. So the Gunpowder Plot was ready to blow. In October 1605, 3 weeks before Parliament was reopened, Robert was running out of funds and he recruited one more conspirator. His name was Francis Tresham, and he was the 13th plotter. So there was 13 men all involved, which I knew that Guy Fawkes didn't do it himself, but I didn't really think about who else.
I knew he had people help with him, but I didn't know much.
Well, there was 13 of them. So he had access to money and horses and was to help rally the Midlands, but he actually begged Robert not to go through with it. He was like, nah. he was rich and he had a lot more to lose than what the rest of them did.
Fair enough.
So Robert managed to talk him round, but he was taking a gamble. Like, Francis was the weakest link. He should never have been taken on board. He was notoriously unreliable, unstable, and a blabbermouth. Oh. So yeah, that's exactly who you want to take on.
Duh.
Yeah, these people aren't the brightest, which you'll find out later. There's actually quite a really stupid thing that they do. Anyway, the trouble was, I'm jumping ahead of myself there. Francis was almost too well connected, and Robert knew that he had many friends in the House of Lords, Catholic peers who would die with the rest. But Robert knew that they would go straight to heaven and the Protestants would go to hell. I don't understand why Robert would have recruited Francis, because there's a massive chance he was going to warn his friends.
Oh yeah.
Because I know if someone was plotting to blow my friends up, I'd be telling them.
Well, yeah. So would I.
Yeah, exactly. So some say that's exactly what he did, because on the 26th of October, just 10 days before the explosion, Robert's plot began to unravel. In Hoxton, a village a mile north of London, William Parker, who was Lord Monteagle, he was Francis Tresham's brother-in-law, he received a letter. He was Catholic, but he acted like a Protestant, like he would go to the church services and all that. And he would have been included in the explosion. So, as I said, on that day he got a letter. His servant said that a masked stranger had grabbed him outside and told him to give the letter to his master. So William opened the letter, and it was a warning telling him not to attend the state opening of Parliament because a sudden and unspecified blow was to be dealt against enemies of his religion. Apparently William didn't fully grasp the meaning of this letter, but it was obviously something bad, so he decided to ride straight away to Whitehall to deliver this warning into the hands of the authorities. It was given to King James I's Secretary of State, Robert Cecil. William's servant, Thomas Ward, was himself a Catholic on the recusant grapevine. He told the conspirators of the letter. So obviously they suspected Francis straight away, and they confronted him about the betrayal, but he denied it and swore in the Bible that he was innocent, and eventually they believed him. And it did seem that he was telling the truth, because he actually really knew William really well, so why would he write him a letter? Why didn't he just go and see him and say, don't go, why don't we just go hunting or something,
get him for somebody else,
yeah, so it's never actually been found out who wrote that letter, so who knows. So what's weird, and what no one understands, is why didn't they abandon the plan now that this letter had been sent?
Mm-hmm.
Like, surely they knew that they were going to get caught and they were going to get punished.
Well, you
but
think so?
no, they went ahead.
Oh, okay.
So on the 1st of November 1605, 4 days before the state opening of Parliament, King James I returned to London from a hunting trip. He was handed the letter, and when he read the word blow, he couldn't believe that Robert Cecil hadn't grasped what that meant.
Mm-hmm.
And he ordered Westminster to be searched. The conspirators were making their final preparations, totally unaware that the net was closing in. Robert Catesby's plan was to stay in London until the 4th of November. Then he would ride to the Midlands in advance of the others to join the hunting party raised by Digby for the kidnap of the young princess. So one last time, Francis Tresham urged the others to reconsider, but they wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
They were prepared to die if necessary.
Right.
In the cellar, Guy Fawkes prepared a fuse, enough to smoulder for 8 hours before the gunpowder blew. He was told to stay in the Westminster lodgings until after the explosion to witness the destruction and to confirm the death of King James, and then he would ride to join the others. So at 11 o'clock in the morning of the 4th of November, Thomas Percy paid a visit to his cousin to see if there was any rumours that were circulating about the plot. He then met up with Robert and told him all was well, there was no talk of the letter, so Robert Catesby, he left to ride to the Midlands. But Thomas was wrong. All was not well. So, on the orders of the king, a search party took place in the early hours of the morning of the 5th of November, when it was found out that a Catholic, Thomas Percy, was leasing a cellar under the Parliament. You think he would have changed his name or something?
What do you think?
They found a mysterious man down there. He told them his name was John Johnson and that he was a servant. But of course the barrels of gunpowder were found, and John Johnson, who was really Guy Fawkes, was arrested. And straight away a warrant was issued for Thomas Percy's arrest. Kit Wright was the first to hear the news, and he rushed to the Duck and Drake Inn to warn the others. They obviously fled and spent the 5th of November riding west. Robert was ahead of them, still unaware of the news, but Ambrose Rookwood managed to catch up with them and told them that Guy Fawkes had been arrested. Mm-hmm. So it made sense to keep riding west ahead of the can you say that word?
No, I can't say that word.
No, why can't you say that word? Inevitable.
Oh, inevitable. Is that I don't know what you're trying to say.
Seriously. So it made sense to keep riding west ahead of the... I'm just going to try to say it again. Inevitable. Chase to sweep up his friends in the Midlands en route to escape, maybe to Catholic Ireland. But Robert was never one to play it safe, and he rode to Northamptonshire where his mother lived. Stop laughing. Too embarrassed to face her, he arranged to meet John Grant and Robert Winter at the edge of town. There he told them that even though Guy Fawkes had been taken, they would push on regardless. They joined the hunting party and they spread the rumour that the king was dead, and they would stir the dormant Catholic community into open rebellion. But what Robert didn't realise was that the support for him had faded away and no one came to join the plotters. There was no mass rising of Catholics at all.
Right.
He had less than 40 supporters.
Oh.
They rode from estate to estate preaching rebellion, but the Catholic majority treated them like lepers and just closed their doors. So on the 7th of November, the plotters reached their last safe house on the Shropshire border, which we'll come back to in a minute. So now we're going to go back to the 5th of November in London. So throughout the day, news of Guy Fawkes' arrest spread through Westminster. That evening, the first bonfires were lit in the street to celebrate King James and his son Henry not being blown up. The reason bonfires were lit is because they are seen as signs of joy and to celebrate good news.
Oh.
See, I thought we were burning Guy Fawkes on a bonfire because he was a bad man.
Yeah.
But no, it's the bonfire is a sign of joy.
Oh, right, okay.
To celebrate. So we've got it all wrong.
Oh, fair enough. Didn't know that.
Yeah, I know. It just goes to show I wonder how many other people in the UK are celebrating things that they don't know that they're celebrating. Okay. Anyway. So far in the Tower of London, which is where Guy Fawkes was being held, he had kept his mouth shut and he was still saying his name was John Johnson and refusing to name his accomplices. But on the evening of the 6th of November, the king demanded to see him in person. When he asked Guy Fawkes if he had any regrets, he replied, "Only that I did not succeed." King James asked him what he thought about the royal children, as he would have killed innocent kids. And Guy Fawkes replied, "I thought that I would blow you all back to Scotland. That's what I thought."
Oh. Lovely.
Yeah, we don't like him, eh? So needless to say, he had no remorse.
No.
So King James was obviously fuming. And I think I've said fuming in this episode a few times.
He was fuming.
He was fuming. And ordered that Guy Fawkes be tortured to reveal the names of his co-conspirators. The manacles were used, which meant that he would be suspended by manacles through his arms on the wall, and that would be excruciatingly painful. And that's the genital torture.
Alright.
So he was ordered to be put on the rack. So do you know what the rack is? It's like a table.
Oh yeah, is that where
And
they stretch him?
yeah, basically they would be laid on it, their wrists and ankles would be tied, and yeah. So you got stretched. So this could dislocate limbs and cause permanent disability. So most prisoners would talk so that they wouldn't get put on it, and that's what Guy Fawkes did.
Yeah.
He talked.
Yeah.
So all eyes were now on the Midlands as Guy Fawkes' confession incriminated all the plotters. So this is where they're going to make a stupid decision. They all knew that they were going to get caught. So obviously we're back to where they were at the safe house on the 7th. So they all knew that they were going to get caught, so they decided they weren't going to go down without a fight. They had some gunpowder, which had been meant for cavalry uprising, so they just needed a little bit for their muskets to defend their safe house from attack. But when they checked the powder, they found that it was damp from the rain. So next they made a really stupid decision and decided to dry out the gunpowder in front of an open fire.
Oh my god, that's a bit dumb.
Well, I'm sure you can imagine what happened.
Exploded.
Yeah, there was an explosion. But surprisingly, none of them died, although one of them was actually blinded.
Oh.
So the following morning, the 8th of November, the Sheriff of Worcester had the house surrounded by 200 men. Some of the plotters were in the courtyard and the men started shooting. Apparently the shootout was as epic as any Western, and they just kept firing. Thomas Winter got a broken arm and he ran back inside. The Wright brothers were killed. Robert Catesby and Thomas Percy, realising they were caught, decided to go out together, and they were shot. Thomas Percy died instantly, and Robert Catesby crawled like in a sort of chapel thing next to it, and there was a picture of the Virgin Mary, and he died clutching it. So he had to put on a scene,
Oh, right. Couldn't just go quietly.
No. So John Grant and Thomas Winter were captured and taken to the Tower of London. So Thomas was placed in the cell next to Guy Fawkes, and a jailer would listen to their conversations, so it wasn't long before the rest of the plotters were found and rounded up. So Francis Tresham didn't last long. He developed an inflammation of the urinary tract and he died in his cell. The priest, Henry Garnet, that Robert's cousin Anne had been harbouring, he had hidden in a priest hole for 8 days before he was found.
Right.
He knew about the plot, but he had opposed it, but he was still taken to the Tower with the others.
Right.
They were kept in the Tower till January 1606, where they were brought to trial in Westminster Hall. They were sentenced to a traditional traitor's death. This meant being tied to like a stretcher type thing, which was tied to a horse, and they'd be dragged through the streets of London to the place of execution. The point of them being on the ground was that so that they wouldn't pollute the air that everyone else was breathing.
Oh, right, okay.
So then they would be hanged by the neck until they were not quite dead, then cut down, and then they would either be castrated or disemboweled or their heart torn out. The head would then be cut off and the body cut into quarters, and the body and the head would be displayed on spikes on gates over the London Bridge. That's hung, drawn and quartered.
Yeah.
So that is your story
Uh-huh.
of the Gunpowder Plot.
Yeah.
So it never quite happened, but it was still
Yeah.
crime.
Uh-huh.
And we have the rhyme. Do you know it?
Remember the 5th of November.
Yeah.
I don't know it
So
all.
I'm just going to finish off with the rhyme. Remember the 5th of November, the gunpowder treason and plot. I know of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. Guy Fawkes and his companions did the scheme contrive to blow up the king and parliament all up alive. 70 barrels laid below to prove old England's overthrow, but by God's providence him they catch with a dark lantern lighting a match. A stick and a stake for King James' sake. If you won't give me one, I'll take two. The better for me and the worse for you. A rope to hang the Pope. A pen'orth of cheese to choke him. A pint of beer to wash it down. And a jolly good fire to burn him. Halloha boys, make the bells ring. Halloha boys, God save the king.
Wow. There you go.
And that is why we have bonfires and fireworks on the 5th of November.
Every year.
Every year.
Except the last couple of years because of coronavirus.
Yeah. So, but obviously we got the meaning of the bonfires wrong.
Yes.
But I'm assuming the fireworks is because if it had blown up, it was,
Yeah.
you know,
Exactly.
explosion and the
Yeah.
fireworks and stuff. So,
Yeah.
So every year we, go and watch a fire burn and watch fireworks, and that's the 5th of November. Bonfire night, Guy Fawkes night,
So
fireworks night.
Obviously aren't from the UK and you're ever over on holiday around this time, then you can enjoy maybe a fire display somewhere near you.
Yeah, and honestly, it's not as horrible as it sounds.
No, it's not. It's not. It's actually quite a good night.
Yeah, it's actually quite a good night. We're not like cheering because a man's been burned on the bonfire.
No, we're definitely
So,
not.
thanks to everybody for listening. And if you would like to follow us on social media, our information's in the show notes. If you want to join Patreon, it's patreon.com/CrimeDivers. And
if you don't already and you want to, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, review.
Thanks for listening. Bye.